Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Mismatch. So today I get to sit down with Haley Mlotek. So she is a writer, editor, and organizer. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, in the Nation, the Book Forum, the Paris Review, the Columbia Journalism Review, Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and N+1, among others. She is a board member of the National Writers Union, has taught in the English and journalism departments at Concordia University, and is currently the director of content at Field, a really cool app that I'm going to tell you about. Previously, she's worked at Sense, MTV News, the Hairpin, Worn Fashion Journal, and her first book, No Fault, a memoir of romance and divorce, was published by Viking Books and McClelland and Stewart in February of 2025. So we're going to cover all that and more. Check out my sit down with her. So we have so much to talk about. Haley, welcome, and it's lovely to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, Haley, your story is so interesting because I feel like you've lived 100 lives in one lifetime. Because I understand, like, you were a makeup artist, but you're also an essayist and a writer and an editor and an educator. Can you tell me about, like, how your journey has kind of, like, led you to where you are and what you're doing today?
Yes, when you put it like that, it sounds even more chaotic than it felt to live it. But actually, like in the moment, I definitely recognized that some of it was chaotic, but it sort of oddly made sense. And I do see overlaps between all of those different lives. In the book, I
Hmm.
joked that I'm 10,000 years old, but yeah, there's a lot that's happened in a similarly long length of time. But yeah, like you can see, for example, in No Fault, my experience as a makeup artist is how I became so interested in film, and that I was always somebody who was interested in reading and writing, but it took me a really long time to figure out how to make that a career. And of course, making that a career involved doing lots of jobs that weren't writing and editing in order to pay the rent, which is how I got involved in organizing. And of course, got so lucky to have these day jobs that support my own writing practice. So yeah, it's a little let's not say messy. It's a little bit improvised, but it's all worked out.
Totally. I say that, like, I think all of those things in your life kind of like have helped you be so wonderful at like what you do, honestly, because you're like, you've touched on so many different things that, like, in one maybe strange way, like complement each other that you wouldn't necessarily maybe write like on a resume. You'd be like, what? But then it actually like all like adds up and makes sense.
Absolutely. And I do, when I'm teaching, I tell my students, because I did not go to a traditional university. I didn't have that experience. But makeup school is where I really learned to figure things out. For example, I always tell them that my teachers there would tell us that if somebody ever asked us to do something that we weren't sure if we could do, we would just say, I'll figure it out, to never say that you can't do something or to say
Right.
no. And that's been some of the most useful career advice, no matter what career I was currently in.
I totally hear you in saying that. I grew up as a dancer for like 18 years. And
Mhm.
although like I don't dance today, I have a BA in journalism and so I also can relate to, working for free to be able to do the other stuff for quite some time. But but those dance skills I say to my parents all the time, like there was so much money, Nicole, and I was like, "Don't worry, I learned other skill sets that I take with me
Yes.
today."
Totally, totally. Everything has a use. Everything's valuable.
For sure, for sure. Congratulations on your book because that's like a massive accomplishment. And I think it's such a unique book, unlike any other I've read, because of all the facets that it kind of like involves. And you did such a clever job at kind of interweaving all of these themes and genres and discussions while still making it personal, you know? And I thought it was really interesting because I know you resisted calling it a memoir. So why was it important for you to kind of blur the line? Like it's there, but it's not. And like, how did you kind of navigate that?
Well, thank you so much. It does mean so much when people have read the book and say nice things about it because I did work on it for all in about 10 years. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a really long time and I went through many different forms. And a lot of that time was alone. It is the type of process where I was so lucky to have so much help from my editors and my agent and my friends, but it just necessitates really being on your own. So it feels so strange and wonderful that now it's the type of thing that people can see actually exists.
For
It
sure.
wasn't just a fever dream. Um, the decision to eventually call it a memoir was something that happened at the very end of the process. And because, like you
Ah.
say, it's not easily categorized, which was something that really surprised me.
Mhm.
I knew that as I was finishing the manuscript, like I knew it was really pushing the boundaries of a lot of nonfiction genres, but it wasn't until I started reading the audiobook that I realized I had written something very weird, which I didn't really think I was capable of. I've done a lot of journalism and essays and like occasionally done maybe something that could be called prose, but no, it surprised me. And I think memoir just felt truest because even when it's a part of the book that's reported or researched or more like cultural criticism. I wanted to be clear that it's all through my perspective. I really
Mhm.
could have kept working on this book for 10 more years, 100 more years. It could have expanded or gone in so many different directions. And there's so many incredible writers who are writing about their own experiences of divorce, and you can see that they're all so different. So even though the memoir, I would say like about half of the book is probably straightforward memoir, and the rest, goes back and forth between other forms. It's both all me and also understanding that me as the writer is just one of many tools that shape how the book ended up existing in the world.
And in saying that, I think you've given like a lot of people, courage and strength in that because these are still conversations, believe it or not, that in my opinion anyway, still have like stigma attached to it. So by having books like yours out in the world, it's like changing that for people, right?
I mean, I hope so. I think there's so much that goes into changing what we consider to be ordinary or expected. One of my favorite pieces of research in the book is the research that was done by Jessie Bernard, which in the 70s, which informed a lot of how we understand the effects of marriage on across gender divides.
Hmm.
And she has this sentence that I quote that I think is so beautiful, which is that once we know enough to question our social norms, that's a sign that they've lost their hold on us. So even having the ability to not even just to talk about divorce, but to be glib about divorce or to recognize it as a legitimate experience, that's a sign that a certain level of taboo around it has fallen away. While at
Hmm.
the same time, it can be really easy, I think, for us to maybe congratulate ourselves too early on breaking those taboos before they're actually gone, because we still see so much, whether self imposed or culturally inherited ideas about how the end of a relationship automatically means failure, or a committed relationship that isn't legally recognized, isn't as worthwhile or
Hmm.
yeah, as like the ones that do have that sort of paperwork. And so we're not all the way there yet necessarily. And it takes a lot of, I think, recognizing just how interconnected issues like the family and marriage and divorce are with other issues. The other writer that I love who I quote in the book is Phyllis Rose, and she put it so beautifully when she said the family and the couple is the smallest political unit that the average person is a part of. And that's both like, it's just so true and succinct in its trueness. But it's also a reminder that participating in it is a political action. It does come connected to everything that's involved in being a person in this world.
It's so fascinating to me to also see like you're saying like throughout history how that's changed depending on, the politics and what like the typical family unit was established as. And I think like as we kind of, I hope evolve that I say that loosely, but that like we can change that. Like full disclosure, like I grew up, with in like a really loving household where my parents were high school sweethearts. They met when they were 16 and they've been married for like so many years. And like say, my grandparents like same sort of thing, but it's interesting because in my family we've seen now like when my parents are boomers, so they're in their like 60s, divorce happening in our family, and everybody is kind of like, but how did this happen, and I don't understand it. And it's like it really is like educating also, like I feel like my generation is educating their generation on like it's okay, like it's fine, we want you to be happy.
Totally, totally. And I do love that because, of course, we know life is short and you have to live every day like it's your last, etc. But I think part of knowing that is also remembering that life is long. Like, if we're so
Yes.
lucky, people are living longer. We have very different ideas about what's considered, I'm putting air quotes around age appropriate.
Hmm.
But 30 is not what it once was. 60 is not what it once was. And so for people to be making those changes at like so many different ages, I think is the best way of seeing that, yeah, like cultural norms actually are shifting. They're not relegated to a younger generation that feels
Right.
that it's their inheritance, that everybody is benefiting from it as well. But I will say, we have so much to be thankful for in terms of where we're at with divorce and marriage and the family. And also, there's still so much work to be done that every generation does need to make sure that we're holding on to, because yeah, there are a lot of people out there that would like to see us regress and would like to see people limited in their freedoms of how they organize their families and their lives.
Hmm. Freedom is scary for some people to accept.
Oof,
That's for sure.
really? Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So I want to go back to your journey with divorce, if we can, Haley, because you met your ex-husband when you were 16, also like so young. And I believe you were together, what is it, like 12 years? That's a
Yes.
that's like you're like a child when you're 16, right? And it's like I think back to myself like being 16 and who I dated and like what that would look like now, and it's so hard for me to wrap my head around. Like for you, like how did you kind of like, I would say like grow like apart and really like realize that, because I think there is so much pressure to, have that fairy tale of you or your high school sweetheart and keep that going and fight for that as much as you can.
Mhm.
Um, but people need to learn to like, it's like when to let go. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And that is so hard. It never gets any easier. This is so silly, but a while ago, like much more recently, I was talking about this with a friend about how does anybody manage to actually end a relationship? And I
Yeah.
literally Googled how to break up.
That's not silly at all. People, I feel like, do that more often than you think.
I was like, there's got to be a Reddit forum out here that can help us. Because, like, even me, like, I think maybe I've developed this reputation as, oh, she wrote a divorce book. She knows, but I don't know. You can read the book and you can see a lot of it was a fugue state where I know something happened, but I couldn't tell you the details. And so that is another reason I think that it made sense to call the book a memoir and to
Hmm.
pull in lots of different experiences, but to center it around my personal story, because it's pretty different, to like meet
For
somebody
sure.
who you marry when you're in high school. For this generation that's like secular and living in an urban city, it's more common in other places and cultures. But that was what happened to me, and it worked for a really long time. It is how I got to see for myself that a long-term relationship can be a place where you grow together and give each other space to, both become the people that you're going to be and to see how your influence on each other shapes that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful for that time and for that experience. And also just grateful that it's funny, technically meeting someone at 16 and ending up married to them is very conservative, but just because of the demographics that I was in, it was quite different and kind of challenging to some people, which I write about in the book as well. So being in a relationship that I think maybe required, like up until we were 25, I would say it required some defending,
Mm-hmm.
was probably good for me because now, it's not that it's not hard or like strange in its own way, but I understand the impulse for people to try and to try to understand your relationship from the outside. And I also understand the impulse to try to find the words to explain why you are or aren't staying in the couple that you're in. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I feel like, a lot of people, I mean, they can't help but ask the question of like, what happened or who's to blame is often like the first thing that comes to mind, right? But like, so what is your like PSA to people when someone is like going through that and you're like, no, like quiet, stop talking, do not say that. This is how you should be approaching this conversation.
Yeah, I think that I'm too Canadian to ever tell people to stop it or to like I do it in my very like gentle way. Because yeah, like I joke, but I'm so serious. The book is literally called No Fault. And I think it's so funny that in North America, the most common phrase for a marriage that dissolves just because both people want to is no fault. Um, yeah, like the presumption that there has to be somebody to blame to me is just a direct extension of this idea that if a marriage or relationship ends, it's because it failed, and you can't fail without somebody messing up, which is so difficult. And I really do see so many different areas of life and culture where I feel like we've internalized this. Of course, I love watching couples therapy, the television show, because
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of complicated thoughts about therapists putting their practice in reality TV and documentaries, but I think that show in particular is such a generous expression of being able to see real life, real time examples of people learning how to interrogate their impulses or their patterns of behavior. And that within that, we've seen just about how more culturally acceptable it is to understand that we're kind of trying to force a narrative on lives that might not have one. There might not be a beginning, middle, and end to a marriage, even because as we see, just because you divorce, it doesn't mean that you stop co-parenting. It doesn't mean that you can just necessarily walk away from each other without having some material ties or of course some emotional ties or social ties. And that it's really, I would say, like, nothing's right or wrong, but it can be really destructive to force these archetypes of a hero and a villain into two people who just believed that they could be together and then realized that they couldn't. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, that doesn't include cases that involve abuse or other
Of
violations.
course.
But with, I think, relationships that end because people grow apart, it's right there in that sentence. They grew apart. How can that be something that constitutes a betrayal in itself?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And like I loved that you also shared like the experience like afterwards and what that looks like. Because often it just ends with kind of reaching that decision and then that's that. But it's like the aftermath of all of that and what that really looks like. Because to me, like I think a lot of people associate divorce with like an ending, But your book feels very much like the beginning of something new and like a whole new journey of like self-discovery as well. Like, what was something that you learned about yourself, would you say, like post-divorce?
Hmm. What did I learn about myself post-divorce? So much. Um, Yes, I think, well, it's such a good point, like you say, that divorce is often seen as the end of something, or it has to be remade into this triumphant beginning. And the ambiguity and ambivalence of that experience I felt wasn't really as well documented. So I definitely wanted to try and keep that in my book. Um, I don't know how we feel about authors admitting that they've read their Goodreads reviews, so I'll do it carefully. But I did see one recently when I like allowed myself to check, um, from a reader who said that she felt like the book captured the experience of moving through time after a divorce and how disjointed and like murky it feels, which was really my experience. It was that sort of kind of manic grief where, everything's slower and you feel underwater, but at the same time, you're trying to make as much happen as possible to distract yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and within that, I do think I learned a lot, especially about how much I need and love other people. I think there's a lot in our culture that very rightly, in a lot of cases, focuses on how to take care of yourself and how to understand yourself as an individual and succeed as an individual, etc. Um, and like, I definitely see the benefit, especially in telling young women, you don't need anybody to complete yourself, especially when it
Hmm.
just relates to heteronormativity. But at the same time, I believe very strongly we need other people. And my divorce was not something that I did alone. It was something that I definitely did with my ex-husband, as well as with my family and my friends and the people who were part of my life in that moment. Um,
Yeah.
I think it really did teach me about how community changes shape even as it stays together.
That's really beautiful because I think, and especially I can say, like, as a woman, I think there's a lot of pressure to, be strong, stand alone, like, you got this, kind of like narrative around any sort of like breakup or divorce. It's like, you're fine, pick yourself back up. But relying on like community and family and friends is like, I can say like firsthand, the only way that I've ever gotten through any sort of like heartbreak. And I think what's amazing, and I don't know if, well, for sure you've realized this, I hope so, I can't be the first one to tell you, but that you've created a community of like support with your book as well.
I really hope so. I hope so.
Yeah,
That,
100%. And that's like so, I like that's, it's so comforting because people that maybe don't have community can find it in that, which is really cool.
I do really hope so. And that definitely was something that drove me in writing the book because the experience of that brought me into community with other writers and readers and artists and filmmakers and just so many different people that I encountered, who are out there looking for each other as well. So any excuse to come together. I love, when I was doing my book tour and people would come and tell everybody in the Q&A about what they were going through. Or there was one Q&A where a woman raised her hand and kind of like she felt like she had to admit, she was like, I just got married. And we all applauded. We were like, you don't have to apologize. We
Yeah.
love that. We love
Yeah.
marriage. We love divorce. We love it all. Like, but just yeah, any chance to hear somebody's experience reflect yours or contrast yours is another one to find your people.
For sure. I think it's really interesting, um how that really is like a bonding experience in society today that truly I don't think we talk about nearly as much, which is to be honest, the birth of this podcast was like, I don't think we really have, like, don't get me wrong. I love the pop culture takes and same thing. I'm a reality TV show junkie. I like the trash. Like, don't get me wrong.
Totally.
But there's so much like inward kind of exploration and community and bonding that goes with these relationships, because I think we don't like we're not what we used to be anymore. Do you know what I mean? Especially like even from generation to generation, like going back to like what we were saying before, like everyone's opinions are so different, and every phase of life is so different. Like, yeah, and in saying that too, like there's like the divorce, then like there's duality to it because you're grieving something, and whether that be individually or again shared with like a community of people if you're going through it right now, or if anybody's watching or listening. But then there's also like kind of like a freedom and right, and I can imagine anyway, that's how I felt after a breakup. There's a freedom and like sense of like independence and exploration that like comes with it as well, so it can be confusing.
Completely. I do often refer to it as the divorce euphoria.
Yes.
But I think people are really quick to embrace and then also feel guilty about. But just because it's so different and it really does have this quality of permission to it where you do kind of get a pass. And I think it's a good thing to give our friends a pass in the immediate
Hmm.
aftermath of like a big life change,
Yeah.
especially one as destabilizing as, breaking up with someone who you maybe lived with or spent many, many years together with. Yeah, I think you sort of need that. You can't, like, if you're not so off balance, it is sort of a way to bring yourself back to whatever is going to constitute balance in the future for you to tip over in the complete opposite direction.
For sure.
Mhm.
So I have maybe I don't know if anyone's asked you this, but has he read your book?
Hmm. I don't know.
You
Will
don't know.
I don't know. We'll pass.
Fair, fair.
Yeah.
No, because I think about sometimes, previous relationships and hearing there's something about having a separation of hearing it from one person's perspective and really being able to like listen to what they were feeling and thinking at the time, and I often think it's a good thing. It brings new perspective and maybe like empathy and appreciation for what was, that sometimes in the moment not everyone is like capable of seeing, because there's so many emotions.
Oh,
um
absolutely. And definitely as a writer, I thought about that a lot. And I've talked about this before, that I did feel both like a very strong sense of just like professional ethics in writing the book, but then also like
yeah.
my personal values and morals about what was right and wrong. And so that's why in the book, I never write anything about what I assume somebody else was feeling. And I'm
Hmm.
very, very careful about making it clear that I'm describing what I perceived and what I remember, because yeah, everybody is entitled to their own story, but the act of writing something down definitely changes so much of what's considered true. And it is a form of power to be able to do that not everybody's capable of. And so I
Hmm.
never want that to be used as like a weapon against somebody else. Um,
Yeah.
while at the same time, yeah, I think it's so important for so many people to give themselves permission to just say, this is my story. It doesn't have to write over yours, but it
Two
does
things to be
exist.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
100%. And I really admire how you did that, because you did it really eloquently and beautifully. And that's, I imagine, hard to do when you're also writing from like a first person perspective of writing what is a memoir. So yeah, my hat goes off to you, and I
Thank you.
think you did a really beautiful job in doing that, honestly.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so switching gears, Haley, if we can. And being back into the world, are you currently dating? Is this
Ooh.
something, are you, because you work for a dating app. So it's like, are you in that, are you in that field? Pun intended.
I will tell you, there was a period of time when, like the whole time I've worked at Field, I've had a Field account, but there were periods when
Uh-huh.
I wasn't using it, so I wasn't dating. Um,
Right.
and then my bio would be, I just work here, which, like I thought that would answer questions, but actually it inspired a lot more questions.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I do work at Field, which is such a great day job. I do the editorial content, so I'm the co-editor of the print magazine, and then I manage the digital content both for the brand and for the magazine itself. Normally, when people ask me if I'm dating, I say, "Who's asking?" So I'll just stick with that.
I love it. I love that. That's a great
Yeah,
answer.
who wants to know?
I love that.
Yeah.
Noted. What is Field for people who don't know? Tell me about the dating app.
Yes, so Field is, we call it a dating app for the curious. It has become really well known and well loved by the community on it for being what I would say an extremely inclusive dating app. It is like it's extremely open to all types of relationships. I would say one thing that really differentiates it, and calls into question whether dating app is even a category that can encompass everything that field has become, is that it's not there in order to achieve a particular goal. People use it for all sorts of things. One of the stories we love to hear about, and we've done some editorial content around, is how many people find friendships on the app, which I love, either like on purpose or incidentally. But yeah, there's, a lot of people who are in open relationships or different configurations of what's called polyamory, people who are exploring things that they want to discover about themselves, or people who really know what it is they're looking for and are, laser focused on finding it. And so it creates, I would say, this very eclectic group of people where there's so many different types of connections possible that it does, yeah, it's been really nice to see from within the company how many surprising configurations you can find with other people when you're open to anything that appears or that anything you can imagine you might be interested in.
It's very cool because as I was kind of reading through it, to be honest, a lot of the categories I didn't even know. I had to like Google. I was like, I've never heard of this before. It was a bit of an education for me, which is really interesting because it just goes to show that there are so many groups of people, and sometimes you can often feel like you don't belong, or like kind of fit into any sort of mold. And so to have kind of somewhere where there is something for you, that's really cool. Especially I feel like how timely is it to have an app like this in kind of the society that we live in right now?
Oh, very much so. I think, yeah, like exactly what I was talking about before. I don't know what Jesse Bernard would think about Field or dating apps, but I think it's a perfect example of if you have the ability to learn a new term or acronym, that's a sign that the idea that there's only one type of sexual or romantic or committed relationship available to you has fallen away. That, as long as you're, yeah, it's not about having to know everything
Hmm.
already, but as long as you're approaching it, understanding that no matter what your past experiences have been or what you already think you know about yourself, that you always have a capacity to learn more about who you are and who other people are. Yeah, I think that's something that I hope is becoming much more prevalent in culture, and just based on what we've seen in terms of how many people are joining Field and reporting really lovely experiences on it. Maybe that's a good sign.
That is a good sign. I think that's the most telling sign. If it's coming from the people, I was the people are the truth. They're the voice.
Yes,
So
totally.
for sure. So like what would you say if you were kind of giving someone who is dating in a city and kind of looking, um, why turn to an app? Because I think like a lot of sometimes now people are reverting back to I want to meet this person in person
Yeah.
because sometimes the digital world can be so convoluted as well. Like even though there's a place for it, and I believe in it. I've had like I've dated. I had long-term relationships based on online dating, and so I think there's a place for it. But also, like people are also trying to get away from it because it's like I want that face-to-face interaction or organic kind of meet cute, that happens. What do you think like is like the movement of like apps and like dating and really how to like find your person
Mhm.
in a world where yeah, sometimes you can the search takes a little bit more searching, you know?
It really, really does. Actually, it's so funny. Right before I started working for Field, I wrote an essay about the representation of dating apps in pop culture, where I was really
Mm,
making it's for this wonderful magazine that was based here in Montreal. It sadly doesn't publish anymore, called Editorial. Um, but I was making the argument that it's so bizarre to see pop culture treat dating apps like this eye rolling, totally boring, like, ugh,
yeah.
that's just like obligatory and always awful, when the narrative potential of a dating app is just remarkable. And a lot of that is really rooted in a history that goes way beyond, I think, phobias about technology. Like it's definitely in there, but there's a lot of great writing and research around the social panics around personal ads. After there was, I'm not going to get into the history of one of the most famous female serial killers, but there is that. If people want to look up Bella Guinness, and that
Yeah.
really freaked people out and made people think that personal ads were dangerous. And you can see X-Files episodes from the early 90s that like, oh, computer dating, you're going to get someone that wants to eat your skin. Sorry, I think that's the episode. And so,
No.
so it's like it's positioned as though it's this new groundbreaking opinion to be suspicious of technology when actually it's as old as any technology can be. And for me, like I definitely relate to the desire to meet people in real life, particularly as a cis woman. There are definitely some things around safety and comfort and then just vibes that you have to have in person. And it can be so nice, especially if it's somebody who, your friends can kind of vouch for and vet for you. That's important too. But for me, the reason I've used dating apps and do use them is because it's the best way to make sure I'm meeting people outside of my immediate social circle and that I am not just relying on the types of people that I already know to continue entering my life. I think that's something that's really remarkable about Field that I wouldn't want to give up. And I do, it's not like I would ever argue against somebody necessarily, because I hear where
For
everybody's
sure.
coming from, but people are very surprising no matter where you meet them, I would say. And yeah, definitely a benefit to Field is just how much you can control the different types of people you're looking for.
When excuse my ignorance
Mhm.
because I'm not on dating apps right now, but like when you like create like a profile for Field, what would be like a recommendation to someone who's like creating their profile to maybe get the most, I don't want to say success, but portray themselves to be like the most authentic version of themselves, you know?
Yeah.
Like I always say like a million and one like mirror pics are not good. Like don't do that. It's not good for anyone. Like don't do that.
Yeah,
That's
that's what
not who
I
you
did.
are, you know? Like things like that. Is there anything that you would say?
I actually just had, like, I love when people ask me this because, in the same way, now I'm the divorce expert, now I'm like the Field expert. And I just,
Yeah.
a friend who's in an open relationship, their partner was asking me for advice on setting up his dating app. And it was rooted in, like, yeah, that thing about I only have mirror selfies or whatever. And
Yeah.
I think it was like a tweet or something where somebody was talking about the cliche of men holding photos of fish and how we always make fun
Yes.
but how
Yes.
that's like maybe one of the only socially acceptable times a man can ask another man to take his picture. I was like, okay, I don't know if that's true, but I love that interpretation. That makes me feel a
Oh, it's
lot friendlier
so funny.
towards
That's so funny.
we
I remember actually, funny enough, like when one of my best girlfriends was dating a guy, the first picture that she showed us of him was him holding a fish, and we were all like, "Oh no."
yeah, it's a cliche for a reason,
Yeah.
but like that really that touched something in me. The idea that it's like, oh right, the men, like the straight cis men, maybe don't have the same permission that I do with my friends, where we will like deliberately in the group chat be like, I need to get photos for my field app tonight. Like somebody
Totally.
get a photo of me looking.
Totally.
So boys,
Amanda,
please
it's
do that.
your job tonight to take hot photos of me.
Exactly. And we're all like, okay, what are we wearing? Like, what's
Yeah.
the lighting situation? Um, but I think like we have a lot of tips that we offer members that can be found in the app or on our blog that are based on what we've seen constitute, like I'm going to use success in air quotes, but just, like best practices, basically, I would say about how many photos and how much you put
Nice.
in your bio. I do think this is the type of advice that's not advice, so forgive me, but I do think trying to match your personality is the best way to approach it. So if you are somebody who is quiet or prefers to reveal things in conversation, like not only is it probably not good for you to force yourself to use a bunch of words and sentences just for the sake of it, but it probably won't be very authentic or honest to force yourself, and it might read that way. So often
Yeah.
better to be a little bit more succinct and let people who are into mystery and drawing people out come find you. And then if you are somebody who is very certain of what you're into and knows what you're looking for, to say that. In my experience, when I've used Field, I've really been so like genuinely touched by the times when I've maybe matched with somebody and we realized that we were just not going to be a good fit. And it was so like, good luck to you,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not hostile, not like, how dare you, just very like, oh, that's not me, but I so hope you find it. So really just being both honest with yourself about how you want to express what you're looking for, and then also being open to having it change over time. I think those are the best pieces of advice I could possibly offer.
I I love that. I think that's fantastic advice. And I love the concise. I often tell people the same. I actually tell my boyfriend that sometimes when he's
Yeah,
explaining something and he's digging himself into a hole. I'm like, less is more. Stop,
yeah,
stop, stop.
no, totally, totally. Yeah, like in my copywriting work, I always have to, repeat to myself, clear over clever. And like sometimes on a dating app, clever is better, but clear is always going to be the best. Yeah,
Number one, for
totally,
sure.
totally.
For sure. So what's next for you, Haley?
Oh, what is next for me? Well, we have the new print issue of AFM coming out, the Field magazine, which is very, very exciting. We have a lot of brilliant contributors that I'm so happy to be publishing, some beautiful photo essays and fiction and poetry and
Amazing.
articles. That will be out in the fall 2025 of this year.
Where can
Um,
people get it?
Great question. You can get it at readafm.com. The first issue is still available for sale there, and you can also read all of the content within the issue on our website as well, which you can found at field.co/magazine. So I'm really focused on that. Summer is our time of getting everything together. I'm especially excited because people can see the first issue is so beautiful, and we're evolving the design of it with a new art director, Meryl Vandenberg, who most recently was at The Gentlewoman. So that's something really exciting for people to look out for. And then I am getting back into my own writing slowly but surely.
Nice.
So we'll see what comes of that. Cross your fingers for me. As soon as I have more to say and share, I'll be back to talk about it endlessly, I'm sure.
That's fantastic. That's really, really exciting. I can't wait to see the issue as well. Even like online, you can just tell there's a really like unique artistic approach to storytelling and how that's all shared, covering different themes and topics, of course. And it's really beautifully done. So
Thank you.
yeah,
I'm so
I
glad.
can't wait. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for inviting me. This was so nice.
I'm glad you had a good time.